US Climate Envoy John Kerry is on an Asia visit and he has arrived in New Delhi after visiting the United Arab Emirates. Kerry will be the second top Biden administration official to visit India in just the last 1 month. Joe Biden's special envoy John Kerry will be holding talks with Indian Environment Minister Prakash Javadekar today. He is also expected to call on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. A spokesperson at the US Embassy in New Delhi has informed WION that Kerry will meet with representatives of the Indian government, private sector and non-governmental organizations as well. The spokesperson also added that India is a critical part of the solution to the climate crisis and that US sees India as an important partner on future clean energy research and development. Climate has been a key priority area for the new US administration. On the first day of his office, President Biden had announced the US rejoining the Paris Climate Pact, from which former US President Trump had withdrawn. Kerry kicked off his trip last week from the United Arab Emirates. He is leading efforts to get countries to commit themselves to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to zero by about the middle of this century. The visit focuses on narrowing differences on climate change goals to slow global warming. India is the world's third biggest carbon emitter. India emits about 7% of global carbon emissions, behind America, which emits about 15%, and China, which emits about 28%, that is 4 times India's levels now. However, Indian government is facing calls from the United States and Britain to commit to a net zero emission target by the year 2050. The per capita emission in India are way lower than that of United States, European countries and even China. And India is concerned that binding itself to such a target could constrain the energy needs of its people. Yet, India has said it will stick to the Paris Accord to reduce its carbon footprint by 33 to 35% from its 2005 levels, and that by the year 2030, and will likely exceed those goals as it ramps up use of renewable energy. India has its own ambitious International Solar Alliance, which aims to harness solar energy to fight climate change. Kerry took part in a climate dialogue for the Middle East and North Africa hosted by Abu Dhabi on the 4th of April. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate will also travel to Dhaka during his April 1 to 9 trip. Experts believe that Bangladesh is especially vulnerable to climate change as it has a large number of people living in areas barely above sea level and lacks infrastructure to protect these people. The visit comes even as Joe Biden has invited 40 world leaders, including Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, for a leaders' summit on climate. The virtual summit will be held on April 22nd and 23rd. Summit will reconvene the US-led Major Economies Forum on Energy and Climate, which brings together 17 countries responsible for approximately 80% of global emissions and global GDP. Later this year, world leaders will gather for the United Nations Climate Summit in Glasgow. The summit will build on a 2015 Paris Accord to halt the increase in global temperatures at levels that would avoid the worst impact of climate change. Joining us on this broadcast now is WION's principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibbal with more details. Siddhant, over to you.
Well, yes, Shobit, today is a packed day here in Delhi, whether it's the visit by the US Special Envoy on Climate, John Kerry, or whether it's the visit of the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. But talking about the visit by the US Envoy on Climate, in a short while from now, in perhaps 1.5 hours, he will be sitting alongside the Indian counterpart, the Environment Minister Prakash Javadekar, and will be holding conversations on how both Washington and New Delhi can be on the same page when it comes to dealing with the climate crisis. India, of course, is seen as a major player when it comes to dealing with the crisis. As you just pointed out, India has one of the highest emissions in the world. But one thing to point out is that the per capita emission is one of the lowest when it comes to the Indian emissions, and it is well below the global average as well. So India will be talking about its initiatives, how India is reducing the emissions, how India is committed to the Paris Climate Accord, and also International Solar Alliance, something that India has been talking about at various multilateral forums and at bilateral meetings. In fact, more and more countries are joining the International Solar Alliance, at the basis of which the focus is to harness the energy of the sun, the solar energy, and that is something that the Indian Prime Minister has been talking about. But by and large, it is a packed 4-day visit of John Kerry. There can be, in fact, a joint statement as well later today, but it depends on the conversations, how long the conversation lasts. He came from UAE, and just before he left UAE, there was a joint statement between the American side and the UAE side as well. So we do expect something like this here in India as well.
Siddhant, one of the key focus of Prime Minister Modi has been a shift towards greater use of renewable energy, isn't it?
Well, yes. In fact, the International Solar Alliance came into being on the sidelines of the Paris Climate Accord, and this was an idea by the Indian Prime Minister, who talked about how India can harness the solar energy, which is very bountiful here, for the benefit of not only for the country but for the international community as well. Initially, it was open for a specific countries only, where, of course, the sun is there. I mean, they fall in the between the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, but now more and more countries, even European countries, are eager to join the International Solar Alliance. So this is something that the Indian Prime Minister has been talking about. In fact, in the month of May, India is going to inaugurate and open the process of its largest solar power project in the southern Indian state of Telangana. So these are the projects that India is working on. The global community has been lauding the Indian role when it comes to fighting the climate issue. But nonetheless, the fact that India is a large economy, India needs its energy needs. So there is, of course, a pressure from the global community, especially by the Americans, that India needs to cut its emission. But India has been talking about that while these countries have become developed and fulfilled their own energy needs using various means, why they're putting restrictions on India now, that India should also cut back on its energy needs through various diverse sources. But at the same time, India is trying to diversify, trying to focus on resources which are less polluting and less damaging to the environment.
Siddhant Sibal, thank you so much for joining us with all the details on John Kerry's India visit. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.